Discover yourself. Discover yourself. Discover.
The Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines is a private, non-stock, non-profit, non-sectarian, service-oriented, and charitable organization which was founded in 1948. YWCA aims to develop the physical, social, intellectual, moral, and spiritual well-being of women and girls in accordance with the Christian ideals for which the movement is deeply rooted. The goal of the YWCA are to bring about quality of life, to develop women as change leaders and members in body, mind, and spirit, to engage in selfless Christian service, and to empower women and girls in dynamic partnership with men and service groups toward total transformation. The Young Women's Christian Association is founded in 1855 by Emma Roberts and Lady Mary Jane Kinnaird. These two agreed to consolidate their efforts for a common cause during the Crimean War. Similar interest group, the Tiny Women's Club, founded in 1921 under the leadership of Mrs. Felicissima Balgosa Barca, became the nucleus of the YWCA movement in the country. The first YWCA was officially organized in October 1926, which is the YWCA of Manila. Its first honorary president was Mrs. Aurora A. Quezon. This was followed by the organization of YWCAs of Baguio and San Pablo, thus the need to have a national organization. Dr. Jose Fajar Martinez was the first chairperson of the Provisional Board who worked on the establishment of the YWCA of the Philippines. And on February 14, 1948, the YWCA of the Philippines was formally created with Dr. Flora Ilagan as the first national president. The YWCA of the Philippines was admitted as a corresponding member of the World YWCA during the World Council meeting in Hangzhou, China in 1948 and was taken in as an active member at the World Council meeting in Beirut, Lebanon in 1951. It is linked with other national YWCA in about 100 countries around the world through the World YWCA, whose headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. The YWCA is at work in the Philippines through groups such as YBODs, who is elementary school girls, Y Teens organized in secondary school, Student Y organized in colleges and universities, Young Professional and the Adult Yers. There is also the Community Youth Club, whose members either be in school or out of school. The YWCA of the Philippines has over 20 local associations all over the country and serves over 50,000 people through these local associations. Local Association from Northern Luzon, Local Association from Southern Luzon, Local Association from Visayas Region, and Local Association from Mindanao. YWCA leadership headed by Mrs. Lilia A. Farinas, National President, Ms. Marla May A. Baez, National Youth Coordinating or NYCC President, and Mrs. Narisa B. Liena, National Executive Director. YWCA of the Philippines Legal Mandate. affiliated with World YWCA. Programs and services are accredited by the Department of Social and Welfare and Development. We partner with other organizations like YMCA, GSP, NCWP, Renewable Energy Coalition, PhilCADSA, FAWA Philippines. Our local association partner with DepEd, CSWDO, and other entities. YWCA pioneered in health and recreation, introduction of physical education in the school curriculum, adult education, community center, camping for girls, youth work, residents, and ecumenical movement. Here are the YWCA strategic actions and accomplishments.
Good afternoon. Since March 2020, the world's preoccupation with contemporary issues was overtaken with the spread of the novel coronavirus strain from China, then westward, even hitting global powerhouses like the United States of America and the United Kingdom. The onset of the pandemic not only brought health scares that drove up interest for attaining a prime state of life through proper nutrition, but also the ability to take matters into our own hands. While businesses were affected by the sudden lockdown across parts of the country, it is the average Filipino household that suffers the most, with their breadwinners being laid off from their jobs and finding difficulty in starting anew during a time when the economic landscape has seen a gradual decline. Hence, the need for a comprehensive platform where one can approach experts on the legal aspect of their concerns. Once again, welcome to our webinar entitled Lawyers Talk About Work During the Pandemic. I am Francine Prades, your host for today's event. As we begin, please be reminded of the following house rules. Number one, maintain webinar etiquette by setting yourself on mute unless acknowledged to speak. You will know if you are muted if you see a red line slashed across the mic icon. Number two, Kindly turn off your cameras. Similar with the mic button, a red line slashed across the camera icon will indicate that your camera is off. Number three, we will be recording this session for documentation purposes only. However, if you feel at any point during this session that you're uncomfortable with the setup, do let us know. And number four, raise questions if you feel like a certain concept isn't clear to you. The purpose of this webinar is for us to learn, but we each run at our own pace, so our speakers will be more than glad to answer your questions. And finally, it's not on the list in front of you, but remember, don't forget to have fun. To start off, let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord through a doxology led by Miss Nina Krista May I Haro, Young Woman National Council member, to be followed after by the Philippine National Anthem.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already gone. This grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portions be, as long as life endures. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingil.
At this juncture, let us lend our ears to Miss Marla May A. Baez, the National Youth Coordinating Council President, for a welcome remark.
Is hiring, temporary layoffs, and so much more. This pandemic has not only affected us emotionally, mentally, and physically, but also the Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, true to its vision and empowering young women and girls and value in giving hope to the people, is conducting this continuation of the Why Talk series to talk about the effects of the pandemic in the formal and informal labor sector with experts from the Bureau of Working Conditions and Department of Labor and we will also be talking about the different government assistance that affected employees can look into to ease the financial constraints brought about by the pandemic. I am truly hoping that each and every one of us will be able to learn through this webinar that even though things may seem hard as of the moment, there are programs, there are organizations that are willing to lend a helping hand. Again, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Baez, for that message of unity for all of us. And of course, our webinar today wouldn't be possible without the presence of very special people, namely our guests and participants. Let me acknowledge our guests for today. We have the Bureau of Working Conditions, BWC, DOLE, the Bureau of Workers with Special Concerns, BWSC, DOLE, the YWCA of the Philippines National Council members and officers, the National Youth Coordinating Council or NYCC, YWCA of Rojas City, YWCA of San Jose del Monte, YWCA of Makati, YWCA San Pablo, YWCA of Dagupan. We also have the YWCA of Vigan, YWCA of Marikina, PMHA, the Professional Civic Religious Organization, the University of the Philippines, Maripipi National Vocational School. We also have Batangas State University, Torres National High School, DepEd, Mariano Marcos Memorial Hospital and Medical Center, Santa Lucia Catholic School Incorporated. We also have PASWI, Ilocos Training and Regional Medical Center, Philippine Taekwondo Association, Cavite State University, ACC Hypermart Corporation, Taytay National High School, CVSU, Patam Patamaba Workers in the Informal Sector Enterprise or WISE, Quezon National High School, DSWD, and JRRMC. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of NCWP Vice President for NCR, Ms. Josephine Parilla. And we also have with us our resource speakers here in this actual webinar who will be properly introduced later. And now it is our pleasure that our national president, Mrs. Lilia A. Farinas, is able to grace our event today. Let us give her a warm welcome as she delivers her message. So for now, as we are experiencing some technical difficulties connecting our server, we will now proceed to the main part of our event, the time when our lawyers finally give a talk about the Philippine labor situation in the COVID-19 pandemic and the effect of COVID-19 to the informal sector. To introduce our resource speakers, we have Mrs. Sonny Beth G. Gracela, YWCA of the Philippines Incorporated Treasurer.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker this afternoon, who is going to talk and share with us about the effects of the pandemic in the formal and informal labor sector. He is a medical officer for of the Bureau of Working Condition, BWC, of the Department of Labor and Employment, DOLE, from 2010 to present. He was a medical specialist too of Center for Health Development, DOH-NCR, from 2008 to 2010. Became a public health doctor of Caloocan Health Department from 1997 to 2008. He was a certified family physician by Philippine Academy of Family Physician year 2000. He graduated Doctor of Medicine, batch 1995 from Manila Central University, FDTMF, Caloocan. He graduated also on Masters in Public Administration at the Trinity University of Asia in 2015. He was a member, TWG, on the drafting of DOLE policies on workplace health programs on hepatitis B, OSH tips for kasambahays, chemical safety program, asbestos workplace, HIV AIDS, guidelines on working conditions for healthcare workers, guidelines for workers engaged in prolonged standing and prolonged sitting, as well as DO 198S 2018, IIR of the OSH law, mental health in the workplace program, and the DOLE DTI interim guidelines for COVID-19, DTI DOLE supplemental guidelines for COVID-19. Today's Lawyer Talk webinar, our resource speaker may not be a lawyer, but has wide array of experience in various seminars and speaking engagement about labor guidelines. Now, help me give an enthusiastic applause and welcome to Dr. Marco Antonio S. Valeros.
Good afternoon. Naririnig po? Gusto po yung audio? Okay naman po. Okay. I guess okay naman po. So, thank you po for that very kind and generous introduction. If I have my way, maikli lang po talaga ako magpakilala. Actually, when I introduce myself, ang sinasabi ko lang ay Doc Mark. I am tall, dark, and doctor. Ayan. Pero of course, parang naligaw nga ako dito, no? Kasi ang title ng event natin is Lawyers Talk. Pero as mentioned, sa government naman po kami kasi, no? Kahit po ano yung profession mo, mariritul at mariritul po kayo, no? Sa mandato ng opisina nyo po. And besides, malakas din po ang loob ko na magsalita ngayon kasi may rest pa po ako. Kasama ko po si Director Attorney Karen Traivilla na magde-lecture din po sa inyo mamaya. So please take note yung mga ano nyo, no? Yung mga questions nyo po at we'll try to answer it, no? To the best of our ability. Ako po ba mag-share screen o meron na po? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So I was tasked to present in Philippine labor situation in COVID-19 pandemic primarily yung dole action po, no, sa problem ng pandemic sa labor. So, next slide po. Okay, so with regards to the effect of pandemic, siguro maganda start ko muna, no, yung mga news about yung effect ng pandemic sa labor. Okay, so May 21, 2020, sabi po dito, Dole estimates 10 million workers will lose jobs this year, okay, due to pandemic. Ayan, so masyado siyang mataas, 10 million workers ang mawawalan ng trabaho. Ibig sabihin, hindi sila kasama sa previously na statistics that are unemployed, but sila yung mga employed na posible na mawalan po ng work. Okay, so the fragile state of unemployed youth during COVID-19. Okay, so yan, isa po sa mga vulnerable groups ang youth. Okay, much more nung pandemic, parang isa rin po sila sa mga naapektuhan, kasi of course may mga restriction din po tayo sa mga youth, based on their age. Ayan. Next po. So pandemic paves way for labor malpractice in Philippines. Ayan. So may mga may mga reports na ginagawa siyang excuse ng mga of course hindi lahat, but some of the companies, para magtanggal ng mga workers na hindi sangayon sa mga polisiya nila. Pero of course ina-address naman po ng DOLE yan. Then next, 7.3 million Filipinos jobless in April amid COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, next po. Next slide po. Okay, in Duterte's fourth year, COVID-19 causes highest. Ayan. So sa labor, sa report, siya yung pinakamataas na unemployment rate, for the longest time in our country. Next slide po. So after reading those mga news reports, ito po yung impact of pandemic. Of course, we could deduce from what I've said kanina. Of course, there's higher unemployment. Of course, ang effect ng higher unemployment, pagka wala kang work, of course, poverty. Ayan. There's poverty, there is inequality. Okay? So when there's inequality, hindi pantay-pantay na na access sa mga basic services, Yan yung tinitingnan po natin. Hindi pantay-pantay na pagharap sa problem kasi yung iba well-equipped, yung iba hindi well-equipped, okay, to handle such effect ng pandemic. High level of death, of course, yung impact ng COVID-related deaths versus yung sa mga COVID na related na deaths, kasi ang naging problem natin before yung access sa hospital, access sa medical services kasi restricted yung iba, na COVID lang yung pinamanage po nila. Okay, of course with that, high level of frustration and anger. Okay, galit yung mga tao kasi nga there's unemployment, there's poverty. Okay, so wala silang ibang takbuhan kundi ang gobyerno. Okay, so ang question diyan ay gaano ba kabilis kami na naka-action. Of course, addressing COVID-19 is not just a dull concern. It's a interagency country country approach yan, hindi lang si Dole. Okay, so it's challenge sa amin is how well we coordinate with each other para ma-avoid yung mga duplication of services, duplication of financial assistance na ipinaprovide. At of course yung health effects. Yan yung mga naging epekto niyan hindi lamang po sa health kundi yung economy ang talagang naapektuhan ng pandemic po sa atin pong bansa. Okay, next slide po. So, overview of labor policies. So, of course, batid ng DOLE yung problem, yung mga challenges that were raised. So, kailangan may action po tayong gawin. Kaya yung iba dyan, preemptive pa nga. Kasi bago pa man lumabas yung mga problem na yan, ay may ginawa na rin naman mga issuances ang Department of Labor and Employment. Okay, next slide po. So ano po ba yung mga generalities natin with regards sa policies? No? Number one, the right of workers to visit work is embedded in Philippine laws. Okay? So primary consideration po ng DOLE, of course, yung welfare ng workers po. Okay? Dahil na sa Constitution po yan na dapat ay, of course, ang ano sabi ng we value yung economic contribution ng mga workers. So with that, okay, kailangan silang pagkalooban ng what do they deserve sa law. Okay? Then number two, fighting COVID-19 is everybody's responsibility. Okay? So full of country approach yan. So hindi lamang po gobyerno sa purview ng labor, kasama po namin yung employer at yung employees, yung mga workers. So we always work on tripartite, hindi lamang naman po, of course, DOLE ang nagbabalangkas ng mga batas. Kasama po namin sa pagbalangkas nito ang sektor ng mga manggagawa at of course ng mga employer. Number three, there is a need to balance between opening up the economy with the rights of workers. Okay? So naging challenge po ito sa amin. Okay? Pinayagan na magbukas ang mga businesses na before, tapos yung transpo talagang challenge yan. So ang nawa ng DOLE, of course, naglabas kami ng issuances na kung afford din naman ng employer, mag-provide siya ng shuttle service para sa kanyang mga empleyado. Okay? Or accommodation, bahay na malapit doon sa workplace o doon sa workplace. Okay. Number four, OSH is not one size fits all policy. Establishments are encouraged to adopt applicable provisions and to do equivalencies. Ayan. So, yung mga initiative na po namin, interim guidelines, supplemental guidelines, mga
Iba-iba ako ng location, ma'am, ha?
is geared towards course, as appreciated by yung different establishment, okay, large, medium, small, micro, okay? Pero of course, may mga different level din yan ng compliance. Ano po? Hindi ko sinasabing kapag micro, hindi ka magko-comply. Pero what we're saying is, ito yung basic. Pero pag ikaw ay nasa nasa mas mataas na antas, sa large establishment ka, higit pa sa sa general, sa basic. Yung minimum rather, ang i-require sa iyo, mas malaking responsibilidad ang hinihingi ng batas sa iyo. At of course sa mga micro-establishment naman, yung government naman, naka-mainstream po yung assistance for them. Okay, next po. At of course, government issuances for COVID-19 are continuously evolving. Yeah. Hindi lamang po yung OSH policy, even yung sa GLS, kita nyo mamaya may mga pagbabago din po tayo kasi nag-a-adjust po tayo based on yung current situation, yung need ng industries, need ng workers, yung mga scientific, medical discoveries, ina-adjust po natin. Okay, next po. So, those actions, of course, yung fundamental principles ng rights at work and other international labor standards, yun po yung aming basis for the development and implementation of measures to address the impact of COVID-19 at the national level. Okay, so next slide po. So, rights at work at of course yung national at local standards natin. So sabi din dito, the DOLE continuously promotes the key role that social justice social dialogue, and respect for workers' rights play in any plan to deal with the current crisis and the recovery of it. Ayan. So as mentioned kanina, nasa dole po kami. So ang primary consideration natin, of course, yung welfare ng workers. But of course, we also balance that sa current financial situation din naman ng mga industries. Kaya mga issuances namin on safety and health, we issue it with in different government agencies, no? Katulad ng DTI, DOH, ayan, si DILG, meron din po kaming issuance, nakasama po sila. Okay, next. So, policy responses, of course, yung 4 pillars ang naging focus po natin dyan. Again, hindi po lahat sa DOLE yan. May mga ibang ahensya ng government na involved din po dito. So, integrated policy measures focusing on 4 pillars. Number 1, stimulating the economy and jobs. Okay? So, yung bayanihan 2, yung bayanihan to recover as 1. Okay? Ang dami pong stimulus package po dyan. Of course, hindi si DOLE ang kumahawak lang yan. Andyan din po yung mga financial institution, mga government agencies katulad po ng BPI, na nagpapautang ng ng money para sa mga affected na businesses, na at a very very low interest. Yung iba nga grant pa pagdating sa micro. Okay? Kasi kailangan nating gumastos para gumulong ang ekonomiya. Okay? So paano ka gagastos kung wala kang pera? So kailangan mong mag-create ng jobs. So andyan po yung yung BPWH, kapartner po si DOLE, ang NHA, po kami, creation of employment sa sector ng construction. Of course, we would like to duplicate yan sa mga countryside para yung mga balik probinsya na mga kababayan natin ma-ensure din na magkaroon po ng hanap buhay. Supporting enterprises, employment, and incomes. Ayan. So, may mga subsidy na pinoprovide din po ang DOLE for these enterprises. Number 3, of course, dito talaga si DOLE, protecting workers in the workplace, including occupational safety and health. Okay? So we have at least 2, pero more than 2 yung issuance namin kasi may mga clarificatory guidelines pa on on how we should protect paano magkaroon ng WASH program for COVID ang mga companies. At based po sa namin yung latest na inspection, close to 90% po ang compliance ng mga companies. Of course, I will be honest with you, na sa unang inspection, hindi talaga ganun kataas yan. Kasi 76-80% na compliance na meron kami. Pero as part ng service ng mga labor inspector po natin, of course, hindi naman kami purely regulatory. We also provide technical assistance. Kasi yun yung nakalagay po sa sa guidelines. We will provide technical assistance sa enterprise para makapag-comply sila. So, upon giving of technical assistance, nakapag-comply na sila, kaya yung number, it goes to almost 90% yung compliance po ng mga establishments dito sa COVID-19 WASH program nila. At of course, using social dialogue. Ayan. So, yung continuous communication sa amin ng mga manggagawa, ng mga employer, pinapakinggan naman po yan. May tayong proper venue for that. Okay? In fact, at sa mga rally nga, pinapakinggan din namin sila. Kaya lang ang problem ngayon, parang hindi siya pinapayagan sa kasalukuyan because yung pagrarally is mass gathering. So, may ng lugar na pwede sila doon sa UP kasi may independence ang UP at the same time mas malawak siya, mas na-observe yung physical distancing. Unlike sa harap ng opisina namin sa DOLE, medyo makipot yung daan doon, talagang magkukumpul-kumpul po sila. We value po yung mga concerns and issues na nare-raise po sa amin. Pinapakinggan po ng DOLE po yan. Okay? Hindi naman po kami ganoon kanipis para magalit. Kasi that is part ng process ng social dialogue. Yung mapakinggan po ang mga concerns and issues ng mga labor, even sa sa employer side. Okay, next po. So, overview of labor policies. Okay, continue po. Okay, next slide po. Okay, nagbalik po ata tayo, ma'am. Next slide po. Okay, tapos na po tayo dyan. Yan. So, these are some of the list ng COVID-19 issuances po related to labor. I deliberately exclude yung mga issuances po sa APAP, sa TUPAT, tsaka sa CAMP. Hindi ko na siya isinama dyan kasi that is more of yung financial assistance sa mga different sectors. Yung ACAP para sa mga OFW, yung TUPAT, discussion mamaya ni Director Karen para naman sa informal sectors. At of course, yung CAMP, ito po yung sa private sector na formal employment. Okay? So hindi ko na po sila isinama. Okay? Pero you could see this naman sa our website for you to have a copy and clearer understanding po sa mga issuance na ito. Number 1 po, yung BO 215-20, Rule Amending Section 12 of Rule 1, Rules Implementing Book 4 of the Labor Code on Suspension of Employment Relationship. Okay? Sabi po kasi sa Labor Code po, may mga certain situation na kung pwede po magkaroon tayo ng work suspension on employment suspension on work relationship rather for 6 months kasi this is an extraordinary time. Ang mga tao po ang mga businesses po ay nalulugi at of course mahirap silang makabangon. But of course we also consider yung investment they have made sa kanilang mga workers. So dito po sa issuance na ito, parang naka-floating status yung yung employee for 6 months until such time na maka-recover na yung business, ma-reabsorb po siya yung worker. So nagpatupad na po kami niyan before for 6 months. Tapos itong issuance to the 215, this is an extension. Okay? Kung mamalapatin po na i-extend pa siya ng another 6 months. Okay? Pero of course, after po na ma-exhaust po yung at wala pa rin talaga, then yung separation from service would come in. Okay? Pero in between this yung floating status ng employee, of course, that will give a cue for DOLE na mag-assist din naman doon sa sa mga workers. Okay? We could provide them livelihood assistance, we could provide them training demand, re-skilling, okay? If they would want mag-transfer sa work, okay, o to have other means of livelihood, wala naman pong problema. Department Order 214, Guidance on Processes and Proceeding before the Office of Secretary of Labor and Employment, bureaus and regional offices in areas under community quarantine. Yung 213 kasi yung nasa ibaba nag-suspend po kami ng ibang operations po tulad ng filing ng ng biddings, inspection, etc. Ayan. Pero dito sa 214 na-lift na po yung yung suspension na 'yon. Okay? So, understandable naman kasi during the early stage ng pandemic, talagang close yung business. So, paano tayo makapag comply kung sarado yung negosyo. Pero since nung nung August at medyo maganda na po yung yung takbo ng negosyo kasi may public transport na available na siya. Some of the offices or majority of the establishments operational na. So, na-lift na yung suspension. Okay? Then, Department Order 208, Guidelines for the Implementation of Mental Health Workplace Policies and Programs for the Private Sector. Ito po, na ano siya, no? Na-issue namin February 11, okay, 2020. Way before, no? More than a month bago tayo nagkaroon ng work suspension. Pero naging ano siya sinama ko siya kasi important po siya. Kasi sa mga issuance po namin, yung interim guidelines, supplemental guidelines, na idiin po doon yung importance of mental health program sa workplace. Kasi ang effect ng COVID, hindi lamang po sa yung physical na niya, nahirapang huminga, nagkaka-pneumonia, yung fear and anxiety, okay, ng mga workers ay naroon din. So, maganda na magkaroon nga po ng programa sa mental health ng mga establishment. No? This is a mandatory requirement by law. Department Circular Number 1, Series of 2019, Guidelines on Issuance of DOL, Certification as a requirement for application for payment of unemployment insurance or involuntary separation benefit. Again, ng 2019 pa siya, pero isinama namin siya kasi sa mga nawalan po ng trabaho, of course, ang SSS, nagpo-provide po siya ng unemployment insurance. Pero manggagaling po yung certification from DOLE. Okay? So, sinama siya dyan. Then, Department Order 202, Series of 2019, Implementing Rules and Regulations of the Public Act number 11165, otherwise known as the Telecommuting Act. So, marami po nag-work from home sa atin, At maganda na bago pa man nagkaroon ng pandemya, ay meron na pong guidelines na pinatutupad ng Department of Labor and Employment. Na posible pala na magkaroon po tayo ng work, kahit na hindi po doon sa mismong workplace. Okay? Sa work from home o ibang lugar, other than yung usual na workplace. Next slide pa. Okay? So, bilisan na po natin, nagtatagal tayo. Okay? Mga labor advisory naman, 31-20, payment of deferred holiday pay during the national emergency arising from the COVID-19 situation. Previously, nag-issue po kami ng postponement ng payment, pero dito po sa Labor Advisory number 31, sinasabi po dito na bago matapos yung taon, dapat na ibigay na po, yung holiday pay na defer na ibigay sa mga workers. Then Labor Advisory number 24, -A, revised guidelines on engagement of children 15 to below 18 years of age in public entertainment. Ayan. Of course, may restriction po tayo on sa mga artista na below 18 years old, below 15. Okay? 15 to below 18, So yan na-lift na rin yan, I understand. Okay, Able Advisory number 17B, Guidelines on Employment Preservation upon the resumption of business operations. Ayan. So dito po, nagbigay po kami ng mga guidelines, rather than magsara sila, okay, o mag-declare ng bankruptcy, nag-suggest po yung Department of Labor and Employment ng iba't ibang kaparaanan para magpatuloy pa rin ng work yung mga mga kababayan natin, yung mga workers. Example po niyan yung job rotation. Kung before 6 days work week sila, kasi of course para hindi ka naman magtagal ng trabaho at mapagbigyan ng lahat, pwedeng MWF, yung isang grupo, yung isa naman TTHS na papasok. So in effect, yung days of work nila mababawasan din naman din yung sahod, understandably maapektuhan din po yun. But ang aim naman po natin lang ito temporary lang siya, At inaasahan din natin na pagka naka-recover na po yung business ay magba-back to normal na po sila. Yun ay lamang po, example po kung paano natin ma-preserve yung employment. Kasi mas mabuti na yung may trabaho ka kaysa wala. Labor Advisory number 24, Series of 2020, Engagement of Children 15 to below 18 years of age in public entertainment or information during community quarantine. Yan. So, para rin po yan sa mga artista. Okay. Then, Labor Advisory number 23, Series of 2020, Engagement or participation of a child below 15 years of age in public entertainment or information pursuant to the Omnibus Guidelines on the implementation of community quarantine in the Philippines. Okay? So yung sinabi ko kanina ng statement na policy on COVID with regards sa work is continuously evolving. Okay? So noong una, talagang merong absolute restriction, ikalawa may relative restriction, then uli, pwede na rin naman, pero ganun pa man with pa rin strict adherence sa sa minimum health standards. Okay, next pa. Okay, yung 17-A series of 2020 establishment report form, yan. So meron kaming mga reportorial requirements na nire-require sa mga establishment. Okay? Para po kami mag-guide kami sa mga policy issuances. Siyempre kailangan ma-monitor din natin yung status ng mga businesses. Okay? Number 18 series of 2020 guidelines on the cause of COVID-19 prevention and control measures. Dito po nilinaw po namin na of course hindi siya out of pocket ng worker. Dapat manggaling po siya sa sa employer, yung gastos po sa PPE or testing o kung ano man po ang i-require po sa kanila basta related sa COVID, employer po ang mag-shoulder niyan, hindi empleyado. Guidelines on employment preservation upon the resumption of business operation. Okay, ito yung precursor ng 17B. Labor Advisory number 14, series of 2020, clarification on the non-inclusion of 1-month enhanced community quarantine period on the 6-month probationary period. Kasi before, talaga tayo total close ng business. So, meron tayo 6 months probationary period, technically hindi naman pumapasok. So, inilagay natin dito, clarify natin na na hindi siya dapat nakasama sa bilang ng 6 months. Then, Labor Advisory number 1120, supplemental guidance relative to the remedial measures in view of the ongoing outbreak of coronavirus disease 2019. Ito yung mga different remedial measure na pwedeng gawin ng employer, Andiyan yung forced leave, andiyan yung job rotation, okay? Andiyan yung different yung floating status. Pwede rin i-consider yan. Then, March 4, 2020, okay, yung guidelines for implementation of flexible work arrangement as remedial measure due to the ongoing outbreak of coronavirus disease. Okay, so andyan yung mga reduce ng work days ng pasok, andyan din po yung work from home. Next slide po. Okay, so ito na yung DTI, DOLE interim guidelines, prevention and control of COVID sa workplace, yung joint memorandum circular, supplemental guidelines naman. Inakita namin gap sa implementation ng interim, of course, pinunuyan ng supplemental guidelines. And lastly, yung DTI, DILG, naglabas din po kami ng advisory number 1, series of 2020, implementation of new policy direction as the country's policy shift from the total risk avoidance to risk management and how to further the opening of the economy. So, na-involve po si si DILG sa control measure namin ng COVID sa workplace. Next pa. So, okay, so we have the Philippine Constitution as our basis po para sa mga issuances. Next slide po. Andiyan din of course yung labor code. Next po. Labor Code of the Philippines, of course, yung protection to labor, and of course, yung OSH standards. Next po. Yung mga OSH policies namin related to COVID was done in the context of the OSH standards and the OSH law po. Okay, next slide po. Okay, of course, yung RA 11058. Yan. Yung willful failure to comply would result to imposition of penalties written dito sa RA 11058. Again, willful failure lang po yung aming kung inumulta. Next po. Okay, next. For the enforcement, ayan, we do physical visit sa mga establishment. Okay? So we have our labor inspector. They are armed by yung tablet sa real-time na reporting sa amin. Of course, equipped sila with yung necessary na personal protective equipment. Guided din po sila na dapat mabilis lang ang inspection but as much as possible yung conference na ginagawa with the employer at employee employees group, representative rather, no? Kasi when we do inspection, kaharap din palagi dyan na hindi lang yung management, even yung representative ng worker. Na yung conference nila, preferably, we advise them na i-conduct yan sa open area. Okay? Para hindi enclosed yung mas prone kasi sa pagkakahawa sa transmission pagka nasa closed environment. Then technical assistance, pinaprovide siya ng inspector namin sa non-compliant establishment. So yung penalties pwedeng impose for willful failure to comply, and of course suspension kanina hindi siya one size fits all, meron tayong special laws, special provision para sa iba't ibang sector. Okay, next po. In fact, yung guidelines nga ng DOLE, yung interim guidelines saka yung hindi siya minsan magsuwaswak sa sa construction, sa mga artista, sa mga sa mga audiovisual industry workers. So may mga ibang po tayo diyan issuances. Okay, we issued together with yung other government agencies. Okay, so for the conclusion, okay, fighting COVID-19 is a whole of country approach. Hindi lamang po hindi lamang po si DOLE, yung tripartite mechanism natin, kasama si labor, si employer, hindi lamang po national government agencies, kundi even of course yung yung buong bansa, kasama po natin yan sa paglaban sa COVID-19. The DOLE is but one of the actors in this battle. As mentioned nga, full of country approach si DOLE, of course, pagka-workplace amin po yan, but outside the workplace, we may assist ibang government agencies or ibang stakeholders para sa mga bagay na ito. Then, the policies issued by DOLE are with consultation with tripartite partners. Now, majority ng aming issuances, pagka department order yan, rest assured na consult po yung mga tripartite partners. Pero pagdating po kasi sa mga joint issuances, kasi mabilisan ng dyan ang labanan dyan, we may or we may not consult yung pero we involve them sa sa dissemination nito, sa pagbaba nito sa kanilang mga hanay. The DOLE has always considered the welfare of the workers than the economy in its numerous policy issuances. Of course, we almost always try to strike a balance between the two. Kasi pagka masyado ka naman nag-higpit, hindi aandar ang ekonomiya. Okay? Pero pagka economy naman ang pinilit natin, mapakompromise yung welfare ng mga manggagawa natin, magkakasakit sila. Okay? So, binabalansin natin yan. Pero, if given, yung situation na mamimili ka sa dalawa, of course, yung welfare ng workers ang pinipili ng palagi ng DOLE. Policies for COVID-19 are rights-based. Okay? We consider yung mga rights ng ng workers as embedded in Philippine Constitution, sa labor code, sa standards and other related issuances. Policies for COVID-19 on OSH are continuously evolving. Ayan. So, nagbabago yan. Very recently, pinayagan na rin full capacity ang shuttle, pero with barrier. Very recently, okay. I don't know kung na-release na yan pa, pero ang DOH parang they adhere dun sa findings ng CDC, yung Center for Disease Control ng US, na iiklian na po yung quarantine period. Okay? So nagbabago po yan based on sa mga new medical scientific findings or discoveries. Ayan. Then policies for COVID-19 on OSH are written in the context of OSH law. Okay? Hindi po tayo yung lumayo doon. Hindi siya, we did not reinvent the wheel. Inilagay namin siya sa purview ng OSH law. RA 11058. Then 8, a central dimension of building back better is the need for a people-centered recovery that focuses on well-being, improves inclusiveness, and reduces inequality. Ayan. Pag sinabi natin building back better, yung previous situation natin dapat mas maayos po tayo sa ating pong pagbabalik. Ayan. Then 9, as the health crisis gradually abates in our country, attention is now turning to preparing stimulus measures for triggering economic recovery. Ayan. So rest assured po, babaha po ng pera ng tulong sa ating pong mga magagawa sa business sector para ma-realize po natin yung fiscal spending na dapat na gawin para ma-revive po ang ating ekonomiya. At lastly, providing specific support for the skilling and training is in the DOLE agenda. Yung mga naapektuhan na workers, mga kawalan ng trabaho o pansamantalang nasa floating status, we are open to providing them with skills training with the assistance of course ng TESTA o yung ibang mga ahensya rin ng gobyerno. Next slide po. I think okay, next slide po. Second to the last na po ito, So ito po yung takeaway message po natin from Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. Ito po ay isang Indian billionaire na entrepreneur. Sabi po niya, ultimately, the greatest lesson that COVID-19 can teach humanity is that we are all in this together. Ayan. So imagine, napakatagal na panahon na niya. March, nagsimula, okay, December na po tayo. And yet, surviving naman po tayo, although mahirap ang buhay, pero kung sama-sama naman po tayong nagtutulong-pulong, na lalagpasan naman natin ito, there was never a time, sa listing ko sa DOLE, na nakita ko po talaga, to be honest with you, na yung employer at yung worker, talagang dati kasi tubig at langis yan, hindi yan nag-mix. Pero during this COVID-19 pandemic, talagang sila, nagjo-join forces. In fact, sa pag-conduct ng webinar, magkasama din sila. Sa mga policy issuances po namin, talagang very supportive po sila sa isa't isa. Kasi alam po nila yung pangangailangan ng pagkakaisa. So there's unity amidst diversity, ika nga, during COVID. Okay? So next slide po, my final slide po ay lang naman po ito. Kasi baka hindi natin masagot o hindi kayo makapagtanong sa amin, mga gusto nyo pong may tanong, ito po yung mga contact details po namin para kung meron po kayong gustong itanong sa amin after ng webinar na ito, please feel free to contact us. Yung DOLE hotline po namin 1349. Of course, dito yung email at ng BWC, bwcsecretary@gmail.com. Contact details namin 8527-3000, yung track line local 307. Okay? Magandang hapon po ulit sa atin po lahat.
Indeed, addressing the labor situation requires an intersectional and united approach. Thank you, Dr. Valeros, for that truly insightful talk. Before we proceed to our next segment here in the webinar, we would like to remind our participants that if you have any questions for Dr. Valeros, they can type these questions in the chat box and they will be addressed during the open forum. To introduce our next speaker, we have Mrs. Neriza B. Iliana, YWC of the Philippines Incorporated National Executive Director.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Francine. Before I proceed to my task, I would like to extend greetings to all of you from the National Council of the YWC of the Philippines. This online forum is part of the ongoing project of the association and with partnership with the Worldwide WCA COVID response. This is to provide information and create awareness to the public on various issues affecting them in this time of pandemic. Our second speaker, Attorney Maria Karina Perida Trivilla, has been with the Department of Labor and Employment for 16 years and started as Attorney 2 of the Office of the Undersecretary for Labor Relations. She became the Assistant Regional Director of DOLE in 2014 and became Regional Director in 2016. She transferred to the Bureau of Workers with Special Concerns in September 2017. The Bureau is mandated to develop programs, policies, projects, and systems, and provides advisory and technical assistance to the Office of the Labor Secretary and the regional offices relative to the development and protection of the workers with special concerns towards their decent and productive employment. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present Attorney Maria Karina Perida Trivilla.
Thank you, Ma'am Neriza. Thank you as well to the Young Women Christian Association of the Philippines Incorporated for giving us a chance to discuss with you, the participants, what we are doing in so far as the informal sector is concerned in these trying times of to the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, our bureau is generally concerned with the informal sector workers, particularly those that are deemed as marginalized, as vulnerable, as poor. By the way, am I loud and clear? Okay naman po? Okay naman po ang audio ko?
Okay naman po.
Thank you so much for responding. So, in my presentation, which may I request the Secretariat to flash. So we will be discussing about the informal sector. A while ago, you have heard Doc Mark talked about the interventions done by the Department of Labor and Employment insofar as the formal sector is concerned. He also made mention of the financial assistance that we have been doing since day one of the pandemic and until now with the Bayanihan 2 law. So on the next slide, you will see there uh, just a definition of what an informal sector is for our appreciation as against informal employment. So there are two words here that we have to take note. We have the informal sector and we have the informal economy. That is what we're going to learn today. So what do we mean by informal sector? It is already defined under Republic Act 8425 or the Social Reform and Poverty Alleviation Act. Basic sectors are identified as women and youth, uh, including the informal sector. And it is said that they refer to poor individuals who operate business that are usually small scale and they are not registered by any government entity that is responsible for registering establishments. And so there is another definition for purposes of statistics and PSA, or the then National Statistical Coordinating Board, issued a resolution in 2002 which adopted an official definition of informal sector for purposes of statistics. And according to NSCB resolution, they are often characterized as economic units. Yes, the IS are economic units, so they are engaged in the production of goods, production of services to gain employment, informal employment, and earn an income that typically operate in these characteristics. They have low level organization with little or no division between labor and capital as factors of production. Siya yung nangangapital, siya din yung labor, no? Siya din yung labor force. Okay? So there is no separate accounts for personal and business. Nagkakaroon ng commingling of what is personal and what is for business. And employment is based on casual or kinship basis rather than formal arrangements like the unpaid family workers. May negosyo ang pamilya, so ang nagtatrabaho, yung mga anak, and they're not paid. Okay? They could also refer to seasonal employees, yung mga sporadically employed. Magtatrabaho for a certain day and then pwedeng hindi na nasundan or masundan man, mabibilang mo lang ang araw. Okay? And so, they are not capable of employing workers on a continual or continuing basis. Another characteristic that we have to take note of is that these are unincorporated enterprises. So they are not registered with either the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Cooperative Development Authority, the Department of Trade and Industry, and even the local government units registered establishments. And usually, again, they are operated by own account workers. Now, when we say own account workers, they are usually units with less than 10 employees that are, again, based on kinship. So the informal sector excludes the informal workers, informal establishments. And who are these? Ito yung mga non-contract employees, walang paid benefits, no SSS, but they are deemed as economic units. So what are the drivers of informality? Ano ba yung push factor? Bakit tayo nagkakaroon ng informal sector? One is they are survivalist or subsistence entrepreneurs, meaning these informal sectors, they mostly survive on a subsistence nature. They are driven by necessity to earn for daily living, yung tatrabawin mo, yun yung ipapangkain mo. So rather than the choice of having a business or having the business opportunity, they exist to earn for daily living. And due to the lack of formal jobs available in the labor market as a result of economic or flexibilization, like labor flexibilizations that have been encountered in the early 90s and until now. Right? The other one is, another driver is the cost of formalization. So they look at registering as a costly procedure. No? Just imagine mag-rehistro sila sa barangay, mag-rehistro sa munisipyo or sa city, and then you will register with other entities for purposes of taxes. So yun yung driver, another driver which considers them to be to remain or be a part of an informal sector. And the other one is the lack of legal framework. So changes in economy often results in new forms of work like atypical or non-standard in nature. Example natin itong mga unregulated employment relations that we have right now is the gig economy. Yung mga app drivers. So unregulated pa sila. So a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they went to the Department of Labor and Employment, and then they demand for social protection coverage, among other benefits under the law that they want to have. Right? Now, let's move on to informal employment. Ano naman yung informal employment? No? Kung ang informal sector, this is more a little bit specific, ang informal employment is very, very broad. Napakalaki ng sector na ito. Napakalaki ng grupong ito, so to speak. And according to ILO Recommendation 204, informal economy would refer to all economic activities by workers and economic units that are in law or in practice not covered or are insufficiently covered by formal arrangements. So we cover both, it covers both economic units and the kind of worker. Okay? When we say informal economic units, yung pinag-aralan natin kanina, the informal sector with informal characteristics in relation to legal status, in relation to registration, even bookkeeping practices. Now, when we are looking at the worker, they are considered informally employed because they have informal jobs na ginagawa nila or that is being carried out in formal sector enterprises or in informal sector enterprises or even households. So you would see there, yung worker, okay, meron siyang trabaho, pero considered as informal siya kahit nagtatrabaho siya doon sa formal sector enterprise, no? And so, kasama din dito yung, as I've said, informal sector enterprise, no? Those persons working in units that are considered informal, like yung na-mention natin a while ago, the own account workers, and the sector enterprise itself. So workers with informal jobs that are not subject to labor regulation, not subject to taxation or social protection. And you might ask, how about the job orders in the local government unit, for example? They are considered as holding informal employment. Why? Because even if they're working at the local government unit, yung kanilang mga contract of service states that there is no employer-employee relationship. So what was the consequence of this? Wala silang social protection or social welfare benefits. And if meron man, it's voluntary. Okay? The operative term there is hindi sila part ng plantilla. Okay? Now, ano ba yung problem? Ano yung napakalaking problem ng informal employment? It's vulnerability to poverty. Why? Because of low and irregular income, because of lack of legal protection. Si Doc Mark kanina, mention niya yung mga social welfare benefits, occupational safety and health standards that had to be complied with the employer. Otherwise, they would be liable under our existing labor laws and social legislation. They have another characteristic is that they have limited or even no social protection, okay? And they lack access to social dialogue. Hindi sila pwedeng sumali sa mga union or wala silang access na iparating ang kanilang mga hinaing tungkol sa kanilang working condition. Okay? So, pag nagkaroon ng informality, mas lalo silang vulnerable. Come to think of it, informal worker ka na, informal sector worker ka, or informal economy worker ka na, it will further drive you into further vulnerability. Next slide, please. Now, next slide. Okay, thank you. Ito po yung nakadagdag sa vulnerability ng already vulnerable sector, that is the informal sector or that is the informal economy, the COVID-19. Okay? In January 30, the timeline says that World Health Organization declared the novel coronavirus outbreak, which is a public health concern, and it is of international scale. And on the same day, DOH confirms the Philippines' first case of the coronavirus. So, on March 12 specifically, the president declared a community quarantine all over Luzon, including Metro Manila. And a few weeks thereafter, Bayanihan to Heal as One Act was signed into law. So the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act provided for package of assistance to the sectors affected by the pandemic. Okay. Now on August 2, can you go back a bit? Nagkaroon tayo ng breach, naging 100,000 ang ating COVID-19 cases. And right now in the news, may sinasabi, it's very alarming, baka abutin natin ang 500,000. O wag naman sana. Now, in August 4, nagkaroon tayo ng pag-revert sa enhanced community quarantine. So, mahaba-haba yung ating quarantine. Look at the timeline, March, And then in August, bumalik tayo ng enhanced community quarantine. And right now, we are on a general community quarantine. So on September 11, a law was passed which provided for stimulus package to help those sectors that have been heavily impacted by COVID-19. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Now, ano naging epekto ng COVID-19 sa ating ekonomiya and the labor? Okay. So, you would see there that the strict community quarantine measures to contain COVID-19 had restricted economic activities. And this had resulted to a deep contraction of our economy. No? Ang ating gross domestic product, nagkaroon siya ng deep negative 16.5%. Okay? So from ang ganda sana, napakaganda sana ng ating growth rate, ang ating GDP before. If you would see there, kaya lang dahil sa community quarantine, nagkaroon ng severe contraction. And this can be seen in this sector. Ang pinaka may malaking contraction is manufacturing. Okay? And then, mas lalong malaki sa transportation at negative 58.5%. So pag ganito ang GDP, of course, ang epekto nito sa employment, napakalaki. So let's look at our labor force survey in the next slide. So in the next slide, you would see there, okay. During the labor force survey, in 2020, nagkaroon tayo ng unemployment rate na 17.7%. If you're going to compare it to April 2019, masyado siyang malayo. Ang ganda sana ng ating labor situation. Before, it was 5.1%. But because of the quarantine restriction, limited mobility, naging 17.7% ang unemployed natin. But in July 2020, nag-improve tayo. Nagkaroon tayo ng pagbabawas sa unemployment. Naging 10% na tayo. Okay? But if you're going to look at the statistics, tumaas naman yung ating mga self-employed. I-compare nyo ang April data to July data. See? From 9.7 million, tumaas siya ng 12.9 million. Medyo stable pa rin siya, mataas pa rin siya dito sa October latest survey na 17.7 million. Okay? And even the unpaid family workers, tumaas din siya ng from 2.1 million to 3.18 million or 7.7%. Okay? However, ang atin namang unemployment ay bumaba pa ng bahagya. Naging 8.7% na lang. Pero mataas pa rin ito kung ikukumpara mo sa April 2019 na data natin. Okay? So kasi in real terms, kung warm bodies yan, meron tayo dito sa Pilipinas na 3.8 million Filipinos unemployed. Okay? But at least, no, we are recovering. And we do hope that by next year, bababa pa itong ating unemployment rate. Makakabalik sana tayo, hopefully. No? Makabalik tayo doon sa ating 5.1% rate. No? Yun yung pinakamaganda. So far, the lowest unemployment rate that we had in history. Were it not for the pandemic, dumagdag ang ating mga unemployed individuals. But because of the stimulus package, we do hope that we'll be able to recover. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay. Now, ano ba yung epekto? No? Let's look at the effect doon sa ating informal sector workers. No? One, when we look at the community quarantine protocols, it had restricted our economic activities. Dinagdagan pa tayo ng lack of public transport, and this had led to the decrease in demand for products and services. This is in the report of our Secretary of NEDA, Carl Chua. And then it created a digital divide, no? So yung wala kang access sa online facilities, maraming mga informal enterprises nag-close down. Kasi ang ating transactions ngayon is generally conducted virtually or online. And the third one is nagkaroon tayo ng limited access to protective equipment and healthcare. No? Lalong-lalo na noong time na nag-ECQ. Okay. The other thing is it resulted in the loss of livelihoods and income sources of the informal sector. Yung pag-stay mo sa bahay, it means para sa informal sector, wala ka ding kikitain, no? Para masustain ang iyong pangangailangan. No? But sana kung merong connectivity, at least you can sell your goods in online platforms. Okay? And the worst is ang ating displaced workers from the formal sector, yung galing sa formal sector ay pwedeng mahulog sa informal sector for temporary livelihood. So, nababalitaan natin yung maraming mga nagtanggalang empleyado. Okay? And here is the worst case scenario natin, lalo pang nag-increase yung vulnerability and poverty incidents dito sa atin. And when we when we are vulnerable and we're encountering poverty, ano na yan, kulang din tayo dyan sa social protection, no? Para maibsan yung loss of income. Okay? And of course, there's a projection by PDS that dadagdag pa ang mga Pilipino na magiging mahirap. Okay? Next slide, please. Now, ano ba yung ginagawa natin para maibalik natin yung nahulog sa informal to formal employment, or yung nasa informal ay tulungan natin, no, na maging mag-transition to formality. Okay? One is to support for the development of sustainable entrepreneurship as a viable employment track. Meron tayo sa Department of Labor and Employment, the Dole Integrated Livelihood Program. And meron din ang National Wages and Productivity Commission na Productivity Toolbox na tinuturo sa ating mga micro, small, and medium enterprises. And meron din tayong safety net programs for workers affected or displaced due to the COVID-19 crisis. Nandyan ang tulong panghanap buhay sa ating disadvantaged or displaced workers or TUPAD. We also have COVID Adjustment Measures Program or CAMP, and wage subsidy program for small businesses. This is implemented by the Department of Finance. And of course, na-mention ito ni Doc Mark, very important ito. This is of primordial interest to us, the protection of the rights of workers and the welfare of the workers. And it had been done through the issuance of relevant guidelines on the safety and health standards of workplaces issued by both DTI and DOLE, and digitalization of our services for workers and employers. So I will explain these programs, some of these programs in the next slide. What is important is that we have to adopt a whole of government approach in addressing the pandemic. So there must always be close coordination with the Interagency Task Force against emerging infectious diseases, the DSWD and other agencies insofar as the implementation of the social amelioration programs and other programs of the government that help mitigate the impact of COVID-19. And of course, the financial assistance from government institution to assist specific industry sector, particularly those, the farmers, the TNVs, ating mga jeepney drivers, those in the creative industries, walang trabaho, mga artists, and even cultural workers. Okay? So ito yung mga sector talagang heavily impacted. Okay? Next slide, please. So ano ba yung mga social safety net measures that we are doing and we have done during the ECQ? Okay? One is our safety net program, as I've mentioned, is the TUPAD or the Tulong Panghanap Buhay sa ating disadvantaged or displaced workers. And taking into account that there is an enhanced community quarantine, which means that you cannot go out, what we did was to provide emergency employment to informal sector workers, and they worked by sanitizing their own homes and surroundings, and they were paid wages equivalent to the highest prevailing regional wage rates for 10 days. And right now, we are currently implementing the enhanced TUPAD under the Bayanihan Act 2. It's the same program, only that we provided a more more number of days, which means more wages. So from 15 to 17 days ito, which means ang minimum niya is 5,000 and a maximum of 8,000 pesos. But the workers have to do some community contracting or work. And we also linked our beneficiaries with skills training program in partnership with the TESDA. Now, for the formal sector, we have CAMP. This is a one-time financial assistance to affected workers in private establishment in the amount of 5,000 pesos. Now, under Bayanihan 2, those who have received financial assistance under Bayanihan 1 are still eligible to avail of CAMP Part 2. Okay? And of course, we all know yung SAP ng DSWD, and ang Department of Agriculture also implemented their own financial assistance insofar as rice farmers are concerned, even DTI and DOF, the one I mentioned earlier. And of course, na-explain na ito thoroughly ni Doc Mark on protection of worker safety and welfare, issuance of guidelines on how to prevent and control COVID-19. And this one is the promotion of sustainable entrepreneurship, because we see this as a more sustainable undertaking, livelihood. And under this program, ang ating mga beneficiaries who would be interested in embarking on livelihood can receive 30,000 in the form of tools, equipment. But if they are groups, with a minimum number of 15 members, pwede silang mag-receive ng 250,000 pesos. Kung meron naman silang 26 members, they can receive 500,000, and if 51 members, 1 million pesos. Okay? And yung ating livelihood, we link this to our sustainable livelihood framework. Aalagaan ng Department of Labor and Employment if enrolled as an SLF demonstration project, which means for 5 years, holding siya ni Dole, so to speak. At itutulungan siya in the form of technical assistance and more capacity building activities. And this one is the Productivity Toolbox Program for MSMEs. These are trainings conducted by the National Wages and Productivity Commission in the hopes of improving the capability measures of MSMEs insofar as improving their productivity is concerned. Okay. The next slide, please. Okay, ito na yung last slide ko. Ano ba yung nakikita natin na dapat nating gawin so that we will recover as one talaga, as the Bayanihan 2 title states, no? Bayanihan to recover as one. Okay? Now, unang-una sa ating sector, we need data collection on informal employment. We have collection of informal sector statistics, but we use proxy data of self-employed and unpaid family workers. So wala tayo ng complete and accurate picture of the whole informal employment, no? And sa international standards, ito na yung ginagamit nila na statistical um, definition or statistics. In fact, in our Southeast Asian neighbors, apat na lang tayo na country ang walang informal employment statistics. So I repeat, ang ginagamit pa rin natin yung proxy indicators na nakita nyo kanina, which is yung data ng self-employed and unpaid family workers. Worrisome yung data ng self-employed kasi when you look at the breakdown, makikita nyo doon yung mga professionals that technically they are not really informal sector. Okay, now that is very important. Why? Because it is needed for policy formulation and for designing and implementing interventions and support programs. The other one that we see is there is really a need for digital transformation, not only by the government, but also of our constituents. But a survey of the ICT or the Department of Information and Communications Technology would show that hindi pa tayo maabot, no, ang populace, hindi pa nga umaabot ng 50%. So, kukonti pa lang sa atin ang merong connection, internet connection. Why is it important? First, it can provide us timely delivery of information, programs, and services, and it can connect us to get appropriate information. And even we can use this for our livelihood and businesses. And the last one is for us to adopt a national employment recovery plan, which should be comprehensive and inclusive, anchored on decent work and promotion of entrepreneurship. And si ILO, meron siyang na-mention na 4 pillars na diniscuss ni Doc Mark kanina thoroughly. Sinabi niya, kailangan daw ang ating mga polisiya, ang ating mga programa naka-anchor doon sa 4 strategic framework. Number 1, we need to stimulate the economy and employment. Number 2, we need to support enterprises, jobs, and income. We need to protect workers in the workplace, and we should trust social dialogue as a means of providing innovative solutions coming from the sectors involved, from the tripartite sectors, government, employer, and the employee. Okay? So yun yung dapat niyang pag-angkoran. And also other sectoral plans like the Philippine Development and Employment Plan, the Trabaho, Negosyo, Kabuhayan, and Kasanayan. Right now, it's upgraded in Trabaho, into Trabaho, Negosyo, Kabuhayan, at Kasanayan. No? So, ang sinasabi kasi dito, we really need to rescale to adapt to the changing situation that we have right now. So, in sum, for us, we see this as both the challenge and opportunity to be able to face the new normal, but not just new normal, the right new normal of doing things. So now, as never before, there is really a great need for us to be able to develop resiliency plans. No? Hindi lang yung mga papachi-pachi na plans. And we need to identify key actions to address vulnerabilities, particularly ang ating marginalized and vulnerable sector, and use innovative solutions to assist those badly hit by the pandemic. And so with that, I end my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Attorney Trevilla, for that very inspiring talk about recovering as one, because indeed a lot of our fellow Filipinos have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, we would like to remind our participants that if they have any questions for Attorney Trevilla or Dr. Valeros, they can type these questions in the chat box and they will be addressed during the open forum. At this point in the program, you must all be wondering what the YWCA is all about and how it is closely intertwined with the concerns of young women. When we have been talking about job opportunities, and for me as a young woman, I was a bit baffled by a lot of jargons that were quite new to most of us. So, in this audio visual presentation, we will share with all of you what the YWCA movement is all about, what it does, and its advocacy to create safe spaces for women.
As part of a movement with more than 150 years of experience working directly with women and girls, the YWCA movement aligned its program and activities along with the World YWCA strategic goals to ensure that women, young women, and girls are at the center of their own empowerment and that no one was left behind. For the past 150 years, YWCAs around the world have expanded safe spaces to reach over 25 million women, young women and girls in 120 countries. Providing safe spaces to women and girls in the heart of local communities has been a core activity for the Young Women's Christian Association since its founding in 1855 in London and 1926 in the Philippines. The YWCA is also committed to programs on social and economic justice through action and advocacy and service delivery. What makes the YWCA unique is that our program and services are combined with our advocacy to create impact to women, young women, and girls' lives and generate institutional change. The YWCA of the Philippines headquarters is very visible and accessible. It is located in the heart of Metro Manila and it provides shelter to affected women, young women, and girls in an emergency situation and critical times where safety and privacy are assured. Leadership and participation. The YWCA is committed to empower women, young women, and girls by providing trainings, seminar, and the like to fully equip them in decision-making and bring positive changes in the community. Leadership development and participation opportunities will provide them a chance to equip themselves essential skills and positive transformation. Accurate and reliable information. Young women and girls trust the association because of reliable data and information that they can acknowledge and agree on. Reliability is considered as one of the good assets of the association, especially in disseminating information that are verified and true from trusted resources to protect women and young women to be a victim of violence in a virtual setting.
What's very important for Christians to understand is it's not a question of you not praying or not praying enough. This is an actual sickness, and I want you to understand that you are not being punished by God.
We are here to preserve the life of people. Yung mga tao na depress, yung mga tao may sakit. So, alam niyo po, kapag nagbigay tayo ng hope, mas humahaba ang buhay ng taong may sakit. Mas lalo silang gumagaling. Hindi because of the medication. It's because of the hope, the love that we are giving sa mga tao may sakit.
Wala pa po talagang nag-drugs na gumanda ang buhay. So bakit ka magagamit? Learn from that lesson. And if you want your future to become brighter, say no to sex, smoking, alcohol, and drugs. But just say happy life.
Building trust. YWCA is open for every woman, young women, and girls to fulfill the association's goal to develop women as a leader and members in body, mind, and spirit. YWCA have been initiating programs and activities to help boost self-esteem with physical, social, intellectual, moral, and spiritual well-being of women and girls in accordance with the Christian ideals. Furthermore, to build the confidence of members, any sensitive cases or information are confidential in the association. Holistic approach. YWCA have been providing support to women, young women, and girls not just on mental, social, physical, emotional, but most especially their spiritual well-being. The organization is also integrating Christian values in all its programs and activities, and one of these is Bible class for young children. It has created a huge impact in supporting leaders and members to engage in selfless Christian service through sharing of knowledge and wisdom to educate and develop more responsible young people.
Naman tayong ano, dinadala ng Lord.
Intergenerational cooperation. National YWCA prepare and develop women by seminars, conferences, and meetings for decision making for responsible participation in all aspects of social, economic, political, and spiritual life, and this is to build and strengthen the institutional capacity of the movement. In line with the World YWCA, the National YWCA have policy making vested on 17 members with 25% young women in National Council headed by the President. Dignity and respect. YWCA provides opportunities to young women leaders to involve and participate in local and international trainings, conventions, and conferences to develop their knowledge and strengthen their leadership skills. Partnership and accountability. The National YWCA is linked with 100 countries around the world through World YWCA, whose headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. YWCA have partnership with other organizations like YMCA, GSP, BSP, NCWP, Renewable Energy Coalition, PhilCADSA, DepEd, and FAO Philippines, to name a few. This is to extend the scope of the mission and vision of the organization to achieve with the same goals.
Hello there, everyone. I hope you had a fun time watching our audiovisual presentation. So remember our reminder earlier for your questions for our resource speakers? Well, now's the time to think about them again and share it with them or share it with us, with the rest of the group through our open forum. So our moderator for this forum will be introduced to us by Mrs. Nariza B. Eliana.
Thank you, Francine. Again, I would like to thank Attorney Trevilla and Dr. Valeros for that very informative presentation. I myself learned a lot from this. I used to know informal sector in a different way. We are more clear, especially the informal employment. And I guess our participants are now ready for our open forum and ask questions. Those who are watching live on Facebook, please chat your questions in the comment section. Our moderator is very dear to the YWCA. She is currently the president of the YWCA of Marikina. She also serves in the National Council as chairperson of the Legal and Ethics Committee and the National Leadership Training Committee of the YWCA of the Philippines. Attorney Gruta is an educator prior to joining the government. She retired from government service, serving in the office of the Ombudsman as Assistant Special Prosecutor. Let's welcome Attorney Bienvenida A. Gruta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kanina, bago nag-start ang ating mga resource persons, meron na tayong mga tanong. And I'm very glad to say that the questions have been answered fully. For example, what are the adverse effects of the pandemic to the formal sector? What are the adverse effects of the pandemic on the informal sector? And what are the present mechanisms and policies being implemented by the Department of Labor and Employment? So, I think we are ready for the other questions that have not been answered. But before that, I would like to emphasize that now we know tumaas pala ng napakataas ang unemployment sa Pilipinas. Ang sabi nga nila, bumaba naman ng napakababa ang ating GDP. Umabot sa negative 16.5. And what is very important na sinabi kanina ni Director Trivilla, ni Director Karen, Attorney Karen, wala pala ang Pilipinas ng informal employment statistics. At only 50% of the population have connectivity. So with this information in hand, I hope we are ready for other questions for Dr. Mark and Director Trivilla. Can we have the questions online now? Neri, did you receive some questions on the chat box?
Attorney, meron po ditong question para kay Dr. Valeros. Kasi binigyan niyo daw po sila ng statistics on the unemployment, pati si Attorney Trevilla nagbigay din ng statistics on unemployment. Ano po kaya ang foresight for 2021 in terms of employment statistics?
Okay, so yung stimulus package naman po, no? Yung stimulus package is now in place. So, we're hoping na actually yung mga binigay kong statistics kanina, kung nakita nyo, no? Yung latest doon is September pa eh. So, may October, may November na. So, hopefully, nagbubukas na ekonomiya. Okay, kasabay po yun ng pagbaba ng mga cases. Hopefully po by September mag-improve na po yung yung statistics natin on unemployment. In fact, this early marami na rin po kaming na-receive na mga reports na may mga businesses na nagbabalik na, no? Kasi ang BPI, masigasig sila, no? Masipag po sila na mag-aral kung ano yung mga negosyo na po pwede nang buksan. Yung tourism, for instance, yan. Sila yung first na naapektuhan at sila rin po yung last ngayon, na nagbubukas na. So, slowly but surely, yung economy natin nag-i-improve na. So, with the improvement of economy, of course, yung workers, yung workforce, tumataas na rin po yung demand nila. And sana po, no, by next year, yung nauglot nating as mentioned by Director Trevilla kanina, nauglot na pagtaas ng GDP, ma-achieve na po natin. Hopefully, we could build back better po para sa mga sector po ng mga manggagawa.
Mary, I have a question for Doc Mark. Doc Mark, can you hear me, Doc Mark? Hello, can you hear me? Yes, we have been informed that there is a mandatory policy, syempre policy ito, no, on mental health program for the different enterprises. Bigyan niyo po kami ng sample nung nag-monitor po kayo. How is this mental health program being implemented?
Okay, so as katulad din po ng mga policies namin before, okay, when we check dun sa sa workplace yung mga programs na mandatory programs ng DOLE na nire-require sa workplace. Kasama po doon of course yung advocacy, yung workers education, yung training, yan tinitingnan po yan. So in this time of pandemic, no, kasi flexible naman kami, we allow din po yung mga webinar, dissemination. We don't expect naman na yung lahat ng establishment are capacitated or empowered na magkaroon ng mga psychologists o psychiatrists who would provide po yung yung counseling sa mga workers po natin na exhibiting signs po ng merong unexplained na fear and anxiety. So ang po natin doon, ang hinahanap po natin doon, at least a functioning referral system po sa mga existing na government facilities which provides yung mental health services. So sa website naman po ng Bureau of Working Conditions, we have yung mga contact details po, no? Yung iba may bayad pero majority noon wala. So yun po yung hinahanap po namin sa upon inspection. So pag come come yung normal na po talaga na 100% na nagpapapasok na, of course, yung ibang facet ng mental health natin, titingnan din po natin yan kasi sa ngayon hindi natin ma-check yung non-discrimination na policy, no? Of course, yung policy, sige, nandyan yan, pero yung how it is implemented, kailangan din ma-validate yung mga bagay niya. So malawak po, no, yung programa ng DOLE with regards sa mental health. Okay? Andun yung support ng company with regards sa hindi lang po sa access ng services but more of yung enabling environment na yung mga workers nasa environment na na hindi po ganun ka stressful. Ayan. So yun yung titingnan po natin later on. But for now, of course, yung referral system, tapos policies, tapos yung yung mga webinar trainings, yan, yun yung tinitingnan as of now.
Thank you, Doc Mark. Meron yata tayong question para kay Director Trivilla. Referring to the financial assistance, yung pong 30,000 na binanggit niyo, Director Trivilla, yung po ba ay for individual?
Meron po kaming programa, this is called Dole Integrated Livelihood Program. Nagbibigay po kami ng livelihood assistance in the form of tools, raw materials, equipment, or livelihood implements. Kung individual po ang mag-apply sa amin ng livelihood, ang maximum assistance po ay 30,000 pesos. Kung halimbawa naman po group ito, this is a group project, kunyari, they wanted to do some food processing medyo in a larger scale. If they have 15 members, pwede po ang maximum assistance ay 250,000 pesos. Kung meron naman pong members na 26, ang grupo, pwede pong 500,000. At kung meron naman siyang 51 members, the maximum assistance is 1 million pesos. So free po ito. Hindi po ito utang, pautang, free.
Director Trivilla, bigyan nyo naman kami ng example kung ano pong mga pangkabuhayan na businesses ang natulungan ninyo.
Oh yes po. Marami po. Ang DOLE po, lalo sa mga kababaihan, based po doon sa assessment namin na ginawa nung nakaraang taon, ang mga patok po na negosyo ay related sa agribusiness. Related din po sa food processing, yung gumagawa ho ng mga ibebentang food products. Last year po, meron po tayong inawardan na grupo ng kababaihan for garnering the best livelihood project sa region, ano po ito, Region 9. Sila po ay gumagawa ng taro chips. And with DOLE's support as well as the local government unit na palaki po nila, marami na pong na-employ ang kanilang group. So iba-iba ho, kami naman ho sa DOLE ay we recognize kung ano yung skills na meron ang ating applicant. So kung halimbawa, interest niya po ang welding, siya ay lalaki or kahit ang mga kababaihan ngayon ay into welding na rin, yung mga nagte-training sa TESDA, we can provide po itong mga welding tools, yung mga compressors. So kung ano po ang interest nila, ma'am, Attorney Bien, yun po ang pinasasubmit natin sa kanila, sa kanilang business plan, and then we will provide po the assistance. And another, mataas po ang mga applicants din namin for sari-sari stores. Kasi yung sari-sari store, low risk lang ito, uupo ka lang, and then of course, papasok na yung income. Pero yung mga nagne-nego cart po namin, ito ay negosyo sa kariton, we provide the cart and we provide the raw material, mataas po ang benta nila on a daily basis. Based po doon sa assessment na ginawa namin. So kung ano ang interest po nila, sila po ang bahala na mag-dictate kung anong gusto po nilang gawin.
Thank you very much for inspiring us. Palagay ko yung mga local associations nag-iisip na kung paano nila matutulungan ng mga kababaihan sa kanilang localities kasi nasa iba-iba po silang probinsya. So meron pa bang mga tanong?
Yes, Attorney Bien, if I may just add, kasi I'm looking at the Young Women's Christians Association. Pwede naman po kayong maging accredited co-partner ng DOLE. Magpa-accredit po kayo sa amin para sa inyo na po namin ida-download ang pera. Kayo na po ang mag-procure ng mga kagamitan para sa members po ninyong gustong mag-livelihood. Kindly note po na ang mga kababaihan at youth ang primary or beneficiary, a qualified beneficiary po ng DOLE Integrated Livelihood. Lalong-lalo na po ang kababaihan. If I may just add po, ito po yung programa na most gender responsive sa Department of Labor and Employment among all other programs. And this was instrumental in us garnering the God Timpala Award last year po. In bronze awardee po ang DOLE. Bronze pa lang po.
Anyway, congratulations, Director Trivilla. So, meron pa ba tayong ibang interesado ng mga local associations ng YWCA? Pwede kayong bumuo ng mga grupo ng kababaihan at tulungan silang magkaroon ng sarili nilang project para kumita naman. May mga tanong pa po ba tayo? YWCA of Makati, meron po ba kayong gustong sabihin?
Ano lang, siguro, alam na ni Neri ito eh. Nag-propose pa kami sa abroad para sa, meron pala dito. So gawin natin para sa YWCA. Ginawa natin noon sa Soroptimis. Nakakuha tayo ng $6,000. May 250 pala o half a million. Ayos na. For Y Makati and whoever wants.
Palagay ko merong Y Makati, please, kayo po ang pilot makikipag-coordinate sa DOLE. Tingnan po natin kung anong mangyayari. Meron po bang gustong sabihin din ang YWCA of Dagupan? Ma'am Early? Meron po bang ibang comment galing sa NYCC?
Attorney, yung isang question po, dun daw po sa OSH, may required po bang dami ng employee para talagang mandated sila to follow OSH? Kasi parang ang dating ng OSH, pang malalaking corporation, pang malalaking kumpanya.
As those, a question is about occupational safety and health standards. So tatanungin natin si Doc Mark, meron po bang mga industries, maliliit na mga businesses na hindi kasala dito sa mga standards na to? Doc Mark?
Ma'am, to clarify ma'am, ano po, yung OSH po is a mandatory requirement po regardless po sa size ng establishment. May mga requirement po kami, no? Pero may kaunting flexibility rin po naman, no? When it comes sa size ng establishment. For instance, kung low risk ka naman at less than 10 yung workers mo, so ang safety officer mo, safety officer is a mandatory requirement kasi sa OSH law. Hindi niya kailangan mag-attend ng 5 days na training, OSH training. Yung ano po, no, yung 8-hour na training o 1-day training would suffice sa training ng safety officer. Okay? Marami pong mga regional offices ng DOLE ang nagko-conduct yan ng PEAT. Yung mga accredited safety training organizations din po ng DOLE sa private part ng CSR nila is to provide din yung ganoong training sa mga kababayan po natin. So to answer yung question po, mandatory po, no, ang OSH po sa lahat po ng sector. In fact, hindi lamang po sa sa formal, maging sa informal, nire-require po talaga yan. Only that hindi namin ma-regulate siyempre ang informal kasi hindi siya registered sa amin. But then yung sa private, sa public, may OSH din po yan. Pero sa public sector, for obvious reason, hindi si DOLE ang nag-implement yan. Andyan po yung civil service na nag-i-implement yan. Pero pwede naman po kayo magpa-assist po sa DOLE kasi part ng service na binibigay naman po ng DOLE is yung pag-provide po ng technical assistance. Pag po tayo matakot na kapag na-inspect tayo, maraming findings because we will assist you naman on how to comply with the requirement of the law. That's all po, ma'am.
So clear na po, Doc Mark, walang exempted. Kasi napaka-importante naman ng occupational safety. So meron pa ba tayong naiwan na tanong? Mary?
Attorney, wala na po dito sa FB.
So mukha ngang nag-overtime na tayo, Mary. But this discussion is very, very exciting. Lalo na yung mga information na nakuha natin na ngayon lang natin nalaman, hindi ba? So, I give the floor now to our host.
Thank you, Attorney Gruta, for that wonderful moderation of our open forum. And now, at this point in the program, we would like to call on Mrs. Nariza Bieliana to present our certificates of appreciation to our resource speakers.
Okay. Again, we would like to thank our speakers and moderator. As a token of our appreciation, we will be presenting to you our certificate of appreciation. First is for Dr. Marco Antonio Valeros. The Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines and the National Youth Coordinating Council presents this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Marco Antonio Valeros for his invaluable contribution as resource person, which led to the success of the White Talk series on the effects of the pandemic in the formal and informal labor sector, held on December 3, 2020 via Zoom, given this third day of December in the year of our Lord 2020. Signed by the NYCC President Marla May A. Baez, yours truly, and signed by the National President Lilia A. Fariñas. We also sent a small token to Dr. Valeros earlier. Hope you like it po. Then another certificate of appreciation is given to Attorney Maria Karina Perida Trevilla for her invaluable contribution as resource person, which led to the success of Y Talk series on Lawyers Talk, the effects of the pandemic in formal and informal labor sector. Given this third day of December in the year of our Lord 2020. Same signatories for Marla May Baez, NYCC President, yours truly, and signed by the National President, Lilia A. Perinas. We look forward to partnering with Dolly, especially to Attorney Dre Villa. We will probably the national can represent the different local association and help them to come up with different programs and projects that would benefit the women and young women. So thank you po. Another certificate of appreciation we would like to give is to Attorney Bienvenida A. Gruta for her invaluable contribution as moderator, which led to the success of the White Talk series on the effects of the pandemic in the formal and informal labor sectors. Same signatories po, Marla May Baez, NYCC President, yours truly, and Lilia A. Perinas, National President. Thank you so much again, Attorney Nida, as always. And we've sent the tokens to all of you and hope you like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you rin po.
Thank you so much, Attorney Gruta, Dr. Valeros, and Attorney Trivilia for your presence here in our webinar. And while it has been such a fun and fulfilling day, I'm afraid that it is now time to sign off. But before we do so, let us have the closing remarks by Dr. Early G. Datario, YWC of the Philippines Incorporated Vice President for Program and Membership.
Pleasant afternoon to everyone. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Marco Antonio Valeros, and may I quote, our tall, dark, and doctor, and Attorney Maria Karina Perida Trivilla for sharing us the impact of pandemic in the formal and informal labor sector. It is a fact that formal and informal sector workers are critically exposed to the COVID-19 pandemic, not only because they are most vulnerable to socio-economic shocks, but also because they live and work in close proximity, increasing the likelihood of infection. To save lives and protect livelihoods, policymakers should implement additional programs that target the labor sector and businesses. This pandemic is a clear reminder of the need to develop mechanisms to extend the coverage of existing social protection programs to, to informal workers to enable them to survive the immediate impact of the pandemic. Again, good afternoon to everyone and stay safe.
Thank you, Dr. Datario, and thank you everyone for attending the Lawyer's Talk about work during the pandemic. This is Francine Pradas, your host for today, saying do stay safe and stay negative from COVID-19.